what do you want to share? What do you want to share about? Like, what inspired you? Obviously, my post was around trauma and people sharing their
Mhm.
trauma and sharing their story. So, what do you want to start the conversation with today?
So the word trauma is
Throwing
getting a lot of
around.
traction. It's getting a lot of traction
It is.
traction lately. And I think I want to put a different spin on it.
Mm-hmm.
So the book I authored and bought to come out in June 10th. It's called Turn Your Traumas into Treasure. And the concept or the idea around it is, which I'm going to write a lot about that process later on, but it's where we are looking at the thing that happened to us in the past as trauma, and then we're not considering turning it into treasure.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea is that, so most of the times, right, the thing that you hear to master, which in the book I talk about the eight state of consciousness, and one of those states for me is personally is helpership. But the idea is that the universe is gonna assign you your purpose, right? And oftentimes it happens to you through trauma or some pleasure. However, but it's gonna attach to you your purpose like a fragrance, right? It's gonna follow you around. You won't escape it because it's gonna make sure that you don't forget that this in that trauma or in that pleasure, you was just to master something. So sometimes we see it and was like, oh my God, I want to escape that trauma. But if you dig into it and you analyze it, you can find a meaning in your life or the purpose in your life because it's in there. The universe made sure that you would not forget it. So now a lot of time people don't recognize that, hey, the thing that happened to you that you really don't find um pleasurable or treasurable is something that if you look into it, you're gonna realize something that's in there that tells you this is what you're here to master. And that's how I see it. So me personally, well, my area was I was supposed to really like focus on spirituality, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because in when I focus on my spirituality, I'm way more creative. So my great grandmother, she was a very spiritual woman. And but then I kind of grew up in the church and I didn't resonate with the church that much. So I was running away from church, running away from that church idea. But that caused me to run away from my spirituality as well. But then when I stopped, I'm like, oh, not sure. Like when you really sit down and get deep and spiritual, you get very creative. Like the idea shows up for you to create on. So I'm like, let me stop. So then I realized something I was always doing very, very easily. It comes very easy to me is helping people, taking care of people, looking out for people. And I even do this thing what I'm working on called Project Asher right now. And what Project Asher is, I did 22 years in the United States. So I retired from it. All my experience, all my credential, all my credibility is in that community. I didn't know how to convert that and transfer it over to the civilian community. So I was like, man, how do I do this? And then I had a recent injury, snowboard injury. And I was sitting on my bed nursing my wounds, reflecting on my life, doing like a sober reflection on my past. And then it hit me like, Asher, you should go back and ask those people what they like or what they don't like about you. And if, for example, like you wasn't here anymore, you wasn't alive anymore, and they had to meet your parents, your mom or your dad or your daughter, and then they had to share something with them about what they like, what they don't like about you, what would it be? And that opened up so much validation for me. Opened up so much validation for me. So what it was all saying was, Asher, on the job, you really took care of people. You might not focus on some of the job detail stuff because that wasn't your skill set. But when it comes to taking care of people, you was very good at it. So now I'm like, oh my God. Sorry, this thing is playing on me.
You're
My,
fine.
my other headphones. It was like, oh my God, this is it. I've been running from this process of my life where I was good at taking care of people. So I'm gonna master the state of helpership. So no, that's what I'm doing. And I feel alive because I get a lot of energy from people. When I'm around people, I get a lot of energy. So that's what I'm focusing on right now.
There's so much in what you just said. There are so many different pathways I want to go. Um, there are two two different directions that I'm interested in, which
Mm-hmm.
is one is the turning the trauma into a treasure. Because I get that.
Mm-hmm.
It's taken me a long time to admit that my gift is my trauma,
Mm.
because to come through my trauma, I had to create, there weren't any tools that were working for me. There weren't any processes that were working for me. I tried so many in trying to shift what I was feeling all the time. That was just a worthless sack of shit all the time.
Mm.
and I could never shift it. And I started working on my stuff about 15, 16 years ago, when no one was doing this work. No one was doing shadow work 15 years ago. No one was doing trauma stuff. It wasn't as prevalent as it is now. And so I had to come up with ways to be able to do it myself. And I've been using those because my mum passed away 5 years ago. And that just opened up Pandora's box of stuff that I didn't even know I had. And so I've had to bring all of those tools that I created many years ago to deal with all the layers of trauma I thought I dealt with. And then also I had a child, and that brought up a whole other world of trauma I didn't know existed either. And the last 5 years, I've had to draw on all of those tools. But now what I get is I had to create the tools as a new way to deal with my trauma, to then help. What I'm getting now is I can now help people deal with their trauma who have found that the other tools don't work for them, because I have a whole new way of tools. So I get that. But I'm interested to hear what the process was in your head, like what you were saying to yourself, or what you needed to go through to realize that your trauma was actually a treasure. And then the other thing I want to talk about is how, because I hear you using the word universe a lot, and yet you were brought up in a very God-based religion. I struggle with the word God a lot. And so I can hear you using the word universe, but you were raised, I'm making an assumption here, correct me if I'm wrong, but you were raised in a very God-based world. So how do you find trust in that relationship with the universe or God, whatever you want to call it? How did you find trust in that? Because that's a challenge, especially if you've been raised in trauma and in religious trauma. How do you find trust in that again? They're two very big questions.
Yes, I love big questions. So I this acronym I use now is God, Universe, Source. GUS.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of put that spin on it. But the first question, what was the first question again?
The trauma to treasure. Like, what
Trump.
process did you go through in your head to turn your trauma into what you're doing now, into your passion? How did you realize that your trauma was your purpose?
So most of the time, I'm looking back on my life and I was trying to figure out what it is that I'm here to do.
Mm-hmm.
And my biggest question is, which is going to tie into the second question. So the question that I go to bed with every day and I wake up with every day is, what happens to the energetic life force that's in us? What happened to it once it leaves the body, once the body no longer animated? What happens to it? Where does it go? That's my big question. Where does it
Mm-hmm.
go? And that question had me thinking a lot about how the universe is set up. So if we take away like everything that, like the basic life support that we gotta do, all that stuff, right? And if all we had to do as people is look out for the next person behind us, that's all we had to do. And when we come here, the person that's come behind us, we gotta look out for them. If that's all we had to do, we ain't gotta work doing any other things. If that's what's the only thing we gotta do. So now that caused me to think that the thing that we experience, we gotta find a solution for the persons behind us. And because they are the only thing that we were responsible for taking care of, then it makes me really appreciate the thing that I experience. So now I'm thinking about it in that perspective. Like, if all I have to do is figure out this thing so I can teach somebody else, now the thing that I experience has value, because somebody else that's coming behind me gonna value it, because they are thinking about, they're fearing like, what's gonna happen to me if I'm experiencing this thing. Like, for example, if I'm an orphan and I'm in an orphanage and I have no idea what my future gonna look like. I'm scared. Like, am I gonna survive this place or escape this place or get somewhere in a family that loves me? If I can't imagine that, then I'm terrified of the future. But if somebody that's been in an orphanage, got adopted, become successful in life, come back and say, "Hey, I was in your same shoes, but now look at what I made my life to be. Now the future look a little bit brighter." So I'm thinking, if the everything is out of the way, and all I'm here to do is take care of people, then I won't resent the things I've been through. I would treasure it now because now I get to use it to help somebody else because it's no longer, oh, it's just me carrying this weight. Now I get to lighten this weight and help somebody lighten their weight. So now it doesn't feel so hard. It
Mm.
feels like treasure to me now because now somebody get to value it, right? If that treasure stays in the vault, locked away, then nobody would know how valuable it is. It's valuable to me because I'm securing in the vault. But if I'm like, you know what, I'm gonna share it with the world. I'm gonna take it out, put it on auction, right? Hey, come check it out. This is my treasure. No longer do I have security set up to protect my insecurities. No, I'm sharing it with other people. And that courage will help somebody else that's in that same position look at their stuff as, oh, you know what? In the end, I'm gonna value it too because Asher just did it, and now he's sharing it with me, so I can do the same too. And that one flips on me. So now I grew up in a community where yes, there was a lot of church stuff, and this is how I see myself now because it took me to a place where I had to really look back at ancestry.
Mm.
So if I look back at ancestry, I was thinking about, okay, it says God, universe, source, right? God, right? God gave birth to himself when he gave birth to men and women, right? So that means, and then the first being gave birth to their kid, which is gave birth to themselves, and it happens the same way all the way to me. So if I trace my lineage, where that takes me to? That takes me to God, universe, source. But that makes me God, universe, source as well. So now that empowers me to think that Asher, you're God just the same, because I'm just God express. I'm just an expression of God, universe, source. So that gave me a lot of power to think that, hold on, buddy, like I have so much power, so much possibility, so much potential. I'm just not tapping into because I'm seeing myself less than what I'm supposed to be. Because my parents gave birth to themselves when they gave birth to me. So did their grandparents. And if you trace that lineage all the way back, you get to what? The creator. So what that makes me an expression of the creator. So based on that concept, I see myself a God universe source. I'm just an expression of it. So no, it doesn't bother me the stuff I went through when I was looking at God universe source a different way because of the church. Now I see it differently. So I'm grateful for the journey where I'm at right now.
I
I gave you a lot just now.
You did, was great. I get that up in my head. So I get we
Mm.
come from the creator. That's the lineage.
Mm-hmm.
But to actually get it in my heart, that it's a struggle. It's a
Yeah.
struggle. And I don't know if it's a struggle because I opened the door up to my connection a long time ago and
Mm-hmm.
then closed my connection because I thought I was going a little bit crazy.
Mm-hmm.
But then also when my mum got sick and I gave birth, my entire world just fell apart. So I have often been heard to say when I've been sitting in bed, going, if there's a universe, if there's a God, if there's a creator, why? Why would that creator take my mum at the time I needed her the most? So
Mm.
it's a challenge to have that level of trust. When people go through hell, we go through losing parents, or we go through losing kids, or we go through war, or we go through a car accident, or we go through illness, we go through some kind of challenge. And the thing that has challenged me the most is trusting that there is something else out there, that we have not just been plopped on this planet to live in some form of hell and then go back to somewhere. And my upbringing was a combination between my mum didn't believe in anything and my dad ended up becoming a born again Christian when I was 12. So there's a lot of, like, my dad was very much, if you don't believe in the church and if you don't believe in God, you're going to have a terrible life. And then my mum was, don't believe in anything because it's all shit anyway. And I'm kind of somewhere in the middle of, well, I see my dad's point, kind of, not really. I find that very manipulative. I don't want to believe in a God that's going to punish me for not believing in God. I think that's weird. Why would he punish me for not believing? That doesn't make sense because he's not meant to be a punishing creator is meant to be this all-loving creator, but then as an all-loving creator, why create so much turmoil for people? And that is probably a completely different conversation, and I don't know if you have any insights on that, but
Oh, I
it
do.
is such a challenging place to sit.
Okay. So let's go back to my biggest question, the one that keeps me up at night. What would say keep me up, but when I think about it at night, I wake up in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
Like what happened to the life force? I call it significant energetic life force, self. What happened to that significant energetic life force once it no longer animates the body? Where does it go? And my answer to that question is it goes everywhere. It doesn't go into a specific place. It goes everywhere. So now, how I'm gonna break this down for you is so within this body, right? This body is designed to trap energy, right? Trap the feeling or experience of reality. So each one of us have an individual experience of reality. Now, the only reason why you know you're you, because of the way you feel. The only reason I know I am me, because of the way I feel. If there wasn't any feeling, I wouldn't know I'm me. I wouldn't know you're you. So our feeling is different. So now, if we have the same feeling, then we won't be different because we're tied to the feeling. So if there's a God universe source, there's going to be one feeling. The only way there's separate feeling is to come into this body. So now, if God universe source express himself through beings in the body, we're collecting the feeling, the emotional experience. That's what we're collecting. The trauma, the treasure, the pleasure, all of those are a collection of feelings. We won't able to experience those if we are one, because only one feeling. Therefore, there's nothing different, right? But in this body, we have the separate feeling. So now each one of us got to really appreciate the feelings that we get to collect, the experience we get to collect, because we can't collect no other place but in this body. So when the energetic life force leave this body, it goes what everywhere, right? It's no longer separate or individualized. It's one thing. So it's one feeling. Nobody's different. The only difference is here. So now when I hear people say, oh, my trauma is this, I'm like, wow, well, God, universe source is collecting some great emotion, some great experience. Like it's amazing because this is another part of my thinking, my belief system is that all of us is one energy playing all the role. Like we say, is God playing all the roles? So God playing the role of you, playing the role of me. One God, right?
Mm-hmm.
Playing all the roles. So even though you might have a traumatic life or I might have a traumatic life, you might say, damn, why God? What this guy playing he's playing the role. It's the same God. He's doing it to himself, if so to speak, right? So then I gotta realize, okay, now if that's what's happening, if God's expressing himself to us to experience a different kind of energy trapping into his body, then I gotta love it, right? Because my expression of God is feeling this thing. Your expression of God is feeling that thing, and God is feeling all different feelings to different people. So don't gotta appreciate it. So my trauma or whatever you want to call it, if it's horrible, it depends on how you decide you're gonna see the world too. So you can experience trauma for a while, and you can shift your perspective to something else. Just like so, your story right now, right? In from a vintage point, it might look awful, right? Just like a cube. You look at a cube, right? A cube is the same shape all the way
Mm-hmm.
around, right? But from an angle, you might look at it like, oh, the cube look different. But it's the same story. But from a different angle, it's gonna look different. But it's the same story. So now I might be looking at your story from one vintage point. I'm like, wow, that's a beautiful story. Then I move to a different angle. Oh, that story is dangerous, right? All those things I'm seeing from different angles. So you could have reposition yourself on your story at the angle you want to see it now. If I want to stick to just see my story beautiful, I go sit my ass in that angle and I won't move. That's my belief system. I'm stuck in it and I won't change it because I want to see this thing for the rest of my time I'm being here. And you can, but if you want to flip it around and experience different things, you can rotate. So people get to do that. And I've been through some of that position where like, okay, my story at one point feels very depressing, very lonely. But I'm like, you know what? I can stay right here and I can sit right here and keep looking at my story that way. Or I can shift my vintage point. So that's what I learned how to do. I learned how to shift my story, shift my vintage point on my story. And that's how I go from trauma to treasure. And I can always go from treasure to trauma too. Depends on how I want to look at my story.
There was this voice that popped into my head when you were just talking,
I want to hear it.
and it said, So then in my world, that makes God an asshole. No,
but you are God, so that means you're an asshole too, right?
exactly. But when you said you were all extensions of God and God is living through us and God is creating all of these different experiences. So then, and in my terminology, so then the consciousness can expand and consciousness can create this expansion through other people. And I look at that and I go, I can appreciate that consciousness is trying to create expansion, but consciousness is an asshole because it hasn't picked a very nice way to do it. I'm sure there were so many other ways that expansion could be created than
Huh?
putting us through this shit. And I have had lots of conversations with people over the last couple of months, and my trauma is nowhere near as
Mm-hmm.
impactful as some people's trauma. Some people have been through way worse than I have, and they've come out the other side.
Mm-hmm.
But I still look at that and I go, why do we have to go through pain, heartache, death? And it's really in my face at the moment because my daughter, who's now 8, so my mum died when she was 3. And for the first 3 years of her life, she watched my mum dying because my mum got diagnosed when she was first born. So
Mm-hmm.
she watched my mum dying. And then she also watched me fell apart. So in her mind, she's now, her questions are, but why do we have to die? Why do we have to, why do we have to get sick? And these are questions that are nearly impossible to answer to an 8-year-old.
Mm.
But she kind of, it's this constant bringing up of, but why? Why do we? And I can feel that uh, part inside of me, because I lost my grandpa when I was young. That part inside of me that does go, yeah, I get all that, but why? Why do we have to go through so much turmoil and trauma just so there's expansion and evolution?
So I would think about it this way. So your daughter lost her grandmother at
3.
when it was 3 years. So she probably don't remember her grandmother that much, right? And then okay, then you lost yours as well. So similar. You had a loss when you was young too, of
Mm.
your okay. So then you gotta think about the situation, the setup. So the universe now, I'm thinking about the universe now. If this is a design where for you to master the state of consciousness that you're to master or the purpose you're to master, then certain things had to happen for you to remember how that feel when it happened. Because we're here to collect the feeling of things. That's just my belief system. We're here to collect feeling because anything you do in life, anything you want, you always come back to how it's gonna make you feel. Right? I'm doing this. Why am I doing this? Because how it's gonna make me feel after I do it, after I get it. We're going
Mm-hmm.
after the feeling. Even the material thing is turned back to what they're gonna make us feel. So we're here collecting feelings. So if I'm on a treasure hunt for feeling, I'm trying to get the as much emotional feeling I can get, either with pleasure or trauma, it doesn't matter which one. I'm collecting. I'm here to collect. So if I'm here to collect those things, then the setup could be where okay, in your lineage, if somebody born into your family, so if we're coming here into to this in this physical appearance, right, expression, we're gonna pick where we're gonna show up, right? That's my theory. So I'm gonna pick the family of Kaylee Grace. I want to have that experience because in that family, I already set up where the experience is gonna be like this. If I want to experience, I gotta go. I gotta come to this doorway, go into this room. So okay, I come to this room, and now I get to experience it. If I go to the room that Ashley live in, I want to experience it. So then you gotta figure. Then you gotta figure like, why do you choose to show up this way? Because I feel like I think we do. We would make a choice when we show up. Like, where are we gonna start this journey? Like what culture we're gonna start in, what family we're gonna start in, what country we're gonna show up at, whatever, right? We picked that location when we came. Because oftentimes when I look at it, I think in a baby, we think the state of consciousness is that's in a baby is a baby, but it's not, right? The body is a baby, but the consciousness is not. So that means as a baby, you are creating your own reality, just you're just not conscious of it.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're creating the story that you want to experience from you're young to you're old, and that means you're in charge of this thing the whole time. Not you could say God, but you are God, so that means you're in charge of this thing the whole time. And at some point, you're like, okay, now I want to change my story. I want to change the experience. I want to collect some different feeling, so I'm gonna switch the game up. Look at my story a little differently. So that's how I look at it. So that might not make sense to you, but that's how I look at it. I think we're fully in control of all that is happening, even if we're not conscious of it.
It does make sense. And it kind of validates. So one of the things that I do to help myself through these very intense feelings, which come up frequently and often, is to approve of them, is to sit and say, depending on what's happening, but usually it starts with, I approve of this feeling that I'm having in this moment right now.
Wow.
Because I don't know why. I can go down the path of my trauma and stories and patterns and addictions and victim mentality and all that sort of stuff, but I don't really truly know why I have the feeling that I have, because there's so many different reasons behind why it would be there. So what I used to do was go down the path of trying to find why. Why is this happening? What's the story? What's the pattern? And I created massive amounts of awareness, and I could sit and go, okay, this feeling comes from this story and this pattern and this habit and this addiction, and this is the unraveling of it. But what I found over the years of doing that is that it doesn't change the feeling. It doesn't shift it. It doesn't alter it. If anything, it seems to amplify it, because now I'm going down the path of, well, this is where it came from. And so then I start looking for a story, and then I find a pattern, and then I find a victim mentality, and then I realize there's an addiction. And then my brain goes into this massive, well, let's go and find all the different places where this happened, and let's try and get rid of it all. This is what I used to do, was let's get rid of it all. And now where I am is none of that works. Going down and finding all of the trauma stories, it doesn't work. The thing that works for me now is the approval, because I realized that the pain was getting amplified through the punishment, because I was punishing myself for feeling anything other than happy, because we live in this world where the expectation is that you should feel happiness and joy and love. And if you don't feel those things, then there's something wrong with you. And then you get punished, whether people on YouTube videos or whether TV or whether media does it intentionally or not, I don't know. But there is this idea that if you are not living this kind of life, then you're doing something wrong. And then automatically from our childhood, if we're doing something wrong, that means we should be punished. And so for me, it's the unraveling now, which is amazing, because I went from waking up in the morning, second I opened my eyes and everything washed over me, the whole realization of my life washed over me. And I would feel just like a worthless sack of shit, like I was just really deeply in the mud. And then that would stay with me all day. And then I would go to sleep with that exact same feeling. And I would go to sleep wondering, why am I, if this is my existence, why am I here? And I've asked this question many times over the last, 47 years of my life, until I started down the approval, until I started going in this, I approve of this feeling in this moment right now. I approve of my anger. If I'm angry, I've had a situation where I was betrayed and I have anger coming up. And instead of going, no, you need to focus on the positive, focus on the positive, focus on the positive. Only think good thoughts about that person. Focus on the compassion. I'm now looking at that going, no, I'm not punishing myself because I feel angry. I feel angry and I feel hurt. I approve of the anger that I'm feeling in this moment right now about this situation. And I approve of the hurt that I am feeling in this moment right now about this situation. And then I'm also bringing in, and I approve of my ability to feel compassion for this person, for what they have been through in their life to create this situation in this moment. And that has been a really powerful thing for me. And I feel like it kind of goes along with what you said. Because if you deny it or push it down or ignore it or punish yourself for it, it just creates more punishment and more denial. Whereas if we go into this acceptance, like you said, you go into this acceptance that you are the creator, you are that universal source within you, you come from that, and these feelings are all serving the purpose and they are all offering expansion. And while it's hard for me to come into that space right now, I can see that with the approval is me dropping the, well, I'm wrong for having these feelings. Does that all make sense?
Oh yes, yes. So I know I'm. It sounds like that works for you so far, which is amazing. So congratulations on discovering that. And so we're working with two entity here. So like in your mind, the shit don't make sense. In your heart, it doesn't feel right, so it doesn't align. Then you gotta figure out how do I connect the two. So
Mm.
oftentimes the easiest way to like to deal with what the heart feels is what the mind thinks. So oftentimes how I put it is like the mind is a container, right? Because it's the one that use words. The mind, the heart does use feeling. So the mind has to figure out a way to contain that feeling with words. So now if I gotta decide, okay, the way I'm feeling, how do I give it a label? Because we gotta give it a label for it to for us to like extract it or get to it. For the mind to access what the heart feels, we need to put a label on it. So now if you feel anger and you create a label for that anger, not just anger, because anger doesn't mean anything. It needs a story, right? So that anger needs a story to really for you to really stick around or for you to access it. So you got to create a story for it. So what kind of story you want to put in anger? So that's what I ask myself. When I feel certain things, like what story I want to give this feeling? That he needs a story. He's talking to me because he needs a story. So the mind I gotta give it a story. So what kind of story do I need to create? And I think about a story that's gonna benefit me. So
And
when I
that's the
when I when I
difference, isn't it? You're coming up with the story yourself as opposed to letting your brain go and find the story for you. Where if it goes to find the story, it's going to go back into the past experience and it's going to bring that shit up.
yeah,
But it sounds like what you're saying is when you
I'm
have that
creator.
feeling, you're not letting your brain find that story, you're creating the story.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right.
Mm-hmm.
That's different.
Yes, because we're both here to make it up and make it real.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, because we're creators. So you can let somebody define your feeling for you, or you can define it yourself. Because somebody can hear your story or like hear your situation, and they can authorize it based on their belief system. Because you ever hear the term "think about your thinking"?
Mm-hmm.
Like somebody you get okay. So what that means to me when I first hear it, I'm like, think about the thinking. Like I'm always thinking, I'm always thinking. What are you saying? But then it hits me like, no, think about your thinking. I mean, you gotta think about your belief system, because your belief system what you use to process your state of reality through, right?
Mm.
It is that doorway that all your reality filtered through. So if your belief system is something that makes you feel disempowered, then every time something happens, that belief system is going to create a disempowering story. So now I had to like, okay, I had to think about what belief system I just process my reality to just now. Oh, the one that makes me feel like I'm not good enough, or the one that makes me feel like the world is a fucking dangerous place. I gotta change that. So now I pick a new belief system to process that reality through, and I change it to give it a different story. So it's all about like what you're gonna use, but like what's belief system you're gonna use to process your reality through. And that's what I do. And that shifts my mindset a lot, because now I don't use just the same one all the time, because the same one doesn't work for everything. Like some emotion need a different belief system. You gotta find which one gonna make you feel more empowered.
I can feel the challenge in that for me because that's a whole new level of self responsibility.
Hmm.
And you can't do that without taking responsibility. And in the trauma stories and in the patterns, it's here because you're not responsible. You haven't been responsible. There's all this blame of, well, no, my mum did this, my dad did this, my sister did this, my uncle did this, my grandpa did this. There's so much blame in the patterning that you can bring the responsibility to your feelings and bring your responsibility to the awareness of all the stories and the awareness of all the patterns. But what you're talking about is the next is like a more expansive level of, well, no, not only do I, if I have an emotion, not only do I not have to let my brain go on a thought trip and find the story for that emotion, I get to create the story. And I also get to then create the thoughts that I'm thinking, because I don't have to just let my brain go off on its own little thought trip all the time. I get to make those choices, and I get to choose the thoughts that my brain is thinking. It doesn't just have to be on autopilot thinking all the time, even though that's the perspective. I don't actually have to do that. I can make a different choice and choose the feelings and thoughts, or choose the thoughts that I want to have.
Wow. So I'm gonna give you something else now, right? This is beautiful, by the way. This is amazing. So what I call it the thought universe. We're gonna take a trip in the thought universe a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But this is something that I discovered that I didn't understand. You heard of this guy named Sadhguru?
Yes.
Sadhguru. Okay. So when I would listen to him one time and he was talking about, he was like, thoughts are puny. Some days I don't even think. I'm like, what? This guy need to be introduced to my mind. I'm thinking all the time, right? But he was like, some days I don't think. And I'm like,
What
So
do
I
you
didn't
do if
believe
you
or
don't think?
yeah. I didn't believe or disbelieve. I'm like, interesting, because he seems like a very convincing guy. So when he says something, like, this guy is another level. But I'm like, all right, so let me go see where I can find a way to experience that too. So I was in Cuba at the time, Guantanamo, Cuba, and I was just saying, like, you know what, I'm gonna try to see if I can really separate myself from my thoughts. And each day by day, I got myself down to two thoughts. I'm like, I'm down there. I'm not thinking that much. So one day I was out scuba diving, and I was out scuba diving with me and my friends, and we was out there, and I was just floating around, and I caught myself thinking. I was like, wow, where was my mind at this whole time? I wasn't thinking. Then I was like, oh my God, Sadhguru is right. So with that experience, it shifted my whole mindset. I'm like, hold on now. So we're saying that we don't have control over thought, which we actually do, right? So now when I go into the thought universe, I travel the thought universe with my belief system. I'm like, what I'm going to look for today. So my belief system is like my searchlight in the thought universe. I'm looking for thoughts that are very empowering. And those are the ones I look to think about, I think through. So now I found out that I do have control over my thoughts, even though we are told that we don't. And I wouldn't be able to validate if I didn't hear Sadhguru was saying that some days I don't think. I'm like, what? He was like, I just meditate, no thoughts at all. So that was very life changing for me. So no, I definitely validate the idea that you don't have to think if you don't want to think. And if you do decide to think, you can focus on the thoughts you want to focus on.
Which, I'm just going to move my keyboard so my lovely cat, there's always one that comes up, doesn't press anything she's not supposed to press. Oh, that just, there's this part of my brain that goes, no, 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 no. you you don't have control over what you're thinking, and all you can do is just be a victim to your thoughts and just let your thoughts happen, and then do the best you can with what you're thinking, which is kind of where I am. I'm doing the best I can, which is funny because I put up a post this morning saying, I can't, oh my God, I just completely contradicted myself. I put up a post this morning where I said, I don't believe in the statement, I'm doing the best I can, because I think that's a very victim statement. And I just said, I'm doing the best I can, because I don't think people are doing the best they can. And when I look at it, did I do the best? It's like, no, I did the easiest thing. Never did the best. I did the easiest thing I could do. But people say you did the best you could do. And if you want to say what you want to say, and then I'll finish this.
Yeah, no. So see, this is another thing that I have to be grateful for where I'm at today, right? So I think if you would have made a different decision or different choice in your past, you wouldn't be in the exact position you would be in today. You might not even be alive, right? If you would have changed one decision or one thought, I
Yeah.
mean, one decision in the past, you
Yeah.
wouldn't be here today. So every time I think about it, somebody say you're not doing your best. Well, if I did more than I should have did before, I probably wouldn't be here right now. So I still gotta be grateful for the effort I put in. No, can I put in different effort? Whatever effort I put in tomorrow is what I needed to put in,
Yeah.
right? And if I show up tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, then guess what? The effort I put in was right because I'm still here.
Yeah.
So I
So I
never
do
just
say I did what I could based on the feelings I had at the time,
hmm.
which I did. I did what I could based on the feelings that I had.
So here's another part of that puzzle, right? So the thought we can control, but the feeling we don't control.
You don't control. I get that.
Yes. So here, because the feeling is the original language.
Yeah.
That's the language that God speaks to us through.
Yeah.
That's
That's
the
the
communication that we
guidance.
all use.
Yeah. That's your
Yes, that
guidance. If
means
you're feeling bad, then you're kind of off. And if you're feeling good, then you know you're on the right path.
either way, all feelings are communicate is a language, is the original language. And the reason why I strongly believe this, because sometimes you might say you need something, right? For one day you get up, you're like, for example, right? You might be a billionaire, right? And you're like, and then I might be a person that look for resources to fund this program, right? And like, I need $1 million. But one day you just wake up with the feeling, I need to give away $1 million. You have no idea why you feel that way, right? But that's what I'm saying. That's a higher intelligence working through us, and it communicate through feelings. So a lot of times people might feel to do something and you have no idea why they feel to do it,
Mm.
right? Because there's a higher intelligence working through the feelings. So now I strongly believe that when I feel something, it's supposed to be. Now, how would I do with the feeling? That's the next step. My mind got to work with that feeling now and do something with it. But the feeling is something that we don't control until we put a story on it.
Yeah.
That's our way of controlling it. Is give it a story that we can actually embrace or live with. But the feeling gonna show up.
So then I get what you said before
Mm-hmm.
about not having thoughts then, because I am assuming that when a person comes to a point where they're focused on their feeling as their guidance system and they're choosing the thoughts that they have in relationship to that feeling, then
Mm-hmm.
all of a sudden the only time you're thinking is when you are choosing to have a thought about a feeling, as opposed to what most of us go through is our brain's just constantly on a thought trip, and it's just constantly going off, and it's going over here and it's going over there, and the brain is having a thought to create a feeling.
Mm.
So then I'm assuming that there needs to be some kind of process where you change the relationship between, instead of the brain being the one that creates the feeling, change the relationship and go, no, no, my feelings are created by the creator.
Mm-hmm.
And then I create the thoughts about the feelings.
Mm-hmm.
And so then that goes down the path of, well, then you'd need to be in a position where you trust in the fact that there is a God, a source, a universe, and you trust in the fact that there is a creator, and you trust in that creator to allow your feelings to be created by
Mm-hmm.
God, source, and the universe. And then I would have to go through my trust issues to be able to do that,
Mm-hmm.
because my upbringing is the external world creates the feelings,
Mm-hmm.
then my brain also creates the feelings, and I have no control over any of it. So now all of a sudden I'm in a position with, okay, so now I have to hand over control to something else that I cannot see, that I do not necessarily know exists, to give me the feelings so I can control what I think about them. And then my control issues all go crazy.
Hmm. So let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
When you lay down at night, when you close your eyes, like, you trust something that's gonna wake you up in the morning, right? What is that thing that you trust that's gonna keep you alive while you sleep so you can wake up in the morning?
So here's the interesting thing about that. I don't, and I struggle to sleep most nights,
Mm-hmm.
because I don't necessarily trust that something is going to wake me up. And
Mm-hmm.
so I don't fall asleep until I am utterly exhausted. And then I
Okay.
don't actually really sleep. I don't have good sleeps, um, because I don't trust that something is going to wake me up in the morning.
Mm. So okay. So I'm gonna go back to this other thing, right? So we don't actually fall asleep. We don't go to sleep. You know what we do? We keep waking up. So when you lay down, you're gonna wake up into another experience of life. And then the next day you wake up. So you're constantly waking up. That's just my theory. My
Mm-hmm.
So I'm always waking up. So when I came in this world, like, if I'm came in the world as God, universe, source, I came into the world asleep, right? In different areas of my life, different states of my life.
Yep.
So now the experience I have in life, each one of those wakes me up, right? So I'm constantly waking up. So when I lay down tonight, I'm gonna wake up into another dream, but it's not another experience of life. And then the next morning, I'm gonna wake up again into this one. So I'm keep waking it up. So all we're doing is waking up until we no longer out. We're no longer sleeping. But that process got to take us through a bunch of different states until we're back to being one with God Universe Source. So the trust part is that's very interesting. You mentioned the trust part because without that piece, I think life is going to be very challenging because you got to trust in you because you're the one that's waking you up.
Life is challenging when you don't trust. You live in a constant state of fear, constant
Mm,
state of fear. And it means that your foundation, there is no foundation for me. I can't speak for anyone else, but for me, living in a space of not trusting means that there is no foundation. So you're constantly feeling like you're either suspended over nothing or you're falling. But there's nothing that, and I used to have these conversations with people where I used to say there's a very big difference for people, and I can see it really clearly if someone has had someone in their life that believed in them and that gave them love. And that could have been an aunt or an uncle or a grandma or a grandpa or a school teacher or a friend. If someone has just one person that validates their existence and appreciates them and loves them for who they are, they have an extraordinarily different life experience
mm-hmm.
to someone who goes through life and doesn't ever have that. Doesn't there is no grandparent, there is no grandma, there is no aunt, there is no grandpa, there is no friend, there is no school teacher that validates their existence. It's an extraordinarily different experience, and it's, for me, it's easy to see the differences between the people because the ones that have just had that one person,
Mm-hmm.
they have this ability to see the world very differently. Because they have this foundation that was built, that when they fall, they land on something. But when you don't have that foundation, when you fall, you don't land on anything. You just keep falling and it doesn't ever seem to stop. And so I am in the process of building that foundation for myself, and trust is a massive, massive, massive part of that. And it is trusting in something that I cannot see, that I cannot validate, that I do not know is real. It's trusting and believing in something that may or may not exist. That's where my trust has to come from. And that's where my foundation has to start. And it is a very challenging place to be. And it's a very scary place to be as well, because it means that you never actually feel safe.
Sounds like it is. Well, it sounds like it is. I have two thoughts that pops when you was talking about. One is about reality, and the other one is about like who's gonna tell that story. So if you're an expression of God universe force,
Mm-hmm.
this experience that you're having right now, if you never experienced this, then who's gonna be able to tell that story? Like if I never experienced what you experienced, I could never tell that story with any
I'd
kind
be
of
happy
like,
for someone else to experience it. I'm more than happy to tell a different story that comes with a foundation.
but but it's no, it comes back to the purpose, like the thing
Yeah.
you're here to master,
Yeah.
right? So you went through all of that, right? It says any problem that follows you around, that doesn't leave you alone, that frustrates you, that piss you off, that give you all those, make you angry. That's a problem you was born to solve. He's not gonna leave you alone to yourself it.
Yeah.
So if you think about this thing that you went through, right? Like who's better to tell that story than the person that went through it?
I agree.
And if you had to create this story that people can resonate with, then what difference would that make in your life? You were able to like get out there now and find a community of people that are experienced what you experienced, but are very scared, doesn't even know to find value in. And you get to tell that story. Like, hey, people showed up where they don't have none of these things. The grandma, the aunt, the great uncle to love them. Like, and this is what they're gonna feel like throughout the process of life. But
Yeah.
if you're feeling like it's this is the cause and this is the effect of it. Then who better tell that story than a person that experienced it? You went through what I call the only university, right? You went to the only university, University of the Universe, right? You
Mm-hmm.
went to it. You get that lessons from it, right? The lesson that you can't go and get in a college. No, you can't. The only place to get it is the school you went through. So now you're certified, university certified to tell this story. You got what I call a PhD and a PhD, a philosophy in doing, a philosophy in being. You've been that. You've done it. So now you're the best one to explain it. And nobody's better than you to explain it. You just gotta learn how to explain it now. And that's maybe the challenge. Maybe that's what you're doing this right now, is to figure out a way. How do you tell that story to other people so they can find value in it? And maybe
Yeah.
that's the last
Yeah.
part of the journey, is to master the state of telling stories, telling your
Yeah.
story. And then from there, you're like, wow, Katie left an impact because she went to that school that nobody would volunteer for unless they're unconscious. And she graduated from that school, and now she's universally certified, and she can tell it better than nobody can tell it.
I so appreciate you saying all of that because no one has articulated it in that way where it gets past my brain. And what you just shared makes so much sense.
Mm, mm,
And you're right, no one's qualified to say that story, to say your story, because you're the one that's gone through it. But there's
mm,
also almost this deeper level of, there are some people in this world that were meant to go through what they were meant to go through because they have the ability to explain it in a way that it needs to be explained.
mm. Because nobody would believe you. If I try to tell you a story, they wouldn't believe me.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
They
Yeah.
wouldn't, but
Yeah.
they would certainly believe you.
And that's exactly why I wanted to do this podcast specifically with people who had been
Mm,
through trauma,
mm,
because I can have conversations with amazing coaches who have never been through trauma. And I've
mm,
tried to do coaching with coaches and counseling with counselors and therapists with therapists who have never been through trauma.
mm.
But ultimately, it's the experience. It's actually going through it that really gives you the wisdom and the compassion as well.
When you were speaking, the thing what showed up was also reality. The word reality pops up. And I wanted to get your take. Like, what do you think is reality? What do you think is reality?
That is such a big question. Have we got another hour? I don't know if I know what reality is. I think my perception of reality is, so my perception of reality is my thoughts and my feelings that are projected out in the world then
Mhm.
create this external experience, which is my reality.
Mm, okay. That's interesting because I was thinking about that word too. I even had some conversation about it. And what I came up with was like reality is not physical, because the evidence of reality is feeling, and feeling is not physical. So whatever you perceive, whatever you feel, whatever happens to you, what it goes back to, it leads to one thing: feeling. Like your five senses, seeing, touching, hearing, smelling, touch, all of those, they're tied to one thing: feeling. Yeah, that's like the bullseye they hit, all of them.
Mm-hmm.
So that means my experience of reality, like my experience of reality, the evidence of reality for me is a feeling, and feeling is non-physical. Like you can't touch feeling, you can't find it. It's not
Mm-hmm.
physical. So reality is not physical. We think it is, because everything that we experience from reality goes to where? One place, the feeling, and the feeling is not something you can grab a hold of. So now that makes me think about everything that I feel and I experience in life is real. Even if somebody say it's an illusion, it's a delusion. It's real, because you know where it goes to? The same place everything else goes to. Feeling. So then I think about reality differently now. So now the things that I'm feeling, I know it's real. Even if it hasn't taken a form. It is real, because every place, everything goes just like the mind, right? You say if something happens 10,000 years ago and 4 minutes ago, they occupy the same place in the mind.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, so then the past and the future exist in the same place too. So all of these things are occupying the same space. how you feel and what you think occupy the same space. So now, what is real?
So then going based on what you're saying,
Mm-hmm.
are you saying that the feelings are the only thing that are real?
Yes.
Mm.
It is crazy to think that way, but if you really think deeply about it, you're gonna come back to that place.
Yeah,
It's like
yeah.
when I talk about my biggest question about like what happens to us and so forth and so on, it comes back to the same question. I was thinking about it, like where does everything go? Like we're thinking that like the body stores the memory, right?
Mm.
Which it don't, right? The body doesn't store the memory because if I passed away and somebody plug a machine in my body, right? They can't download my memory or my experience or my reality. They can't download it. It's not there. Where does it go? It's not there. It's in that life force that was in me. That's where it stores at. And where does that go? Nobody knows. But my answer is it goes everywhere. But it doesn't stay there. So then that puts me back in a position where feeling is the only thing that really matters because that's where everything is at, and that's where everything communicates with us through that.
Mm.
My guest just showed up.
Okay, I will that is such a good place to end it anyway. Otherwise, I'm going to go down another path. Um, this has been amazing. Thank you. God, this has been such a good conversation. I've enjoyed this so much. It went in places I didn't even know it would have ever gone. So thank you so much for sharing so much amazing information with me.
Yes, yes, of course. I think we're both challenging each other, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, what's happening? Yeah.
Can you please share details of how people can find you? Because you are
Oh,
amazing. I want to find out more about you.
yes, I have two websites.
Mm-hmm.
www.demidivine.com. That is where I'm posting my books and stuff and so forth and so on. That's a website can have that stuff. And then my coaching website is www.lifechangingwisdom.com. That's where I do my coaching stuff on. And I'm on
Beautiful.
social media, Instagram and so forth and so on.
And I can put those links in the comment as well, in the description.
Yes, yes, yes. I think the camera went check out on you again.
Oh, it did.
Yes. It did. But yeah, this was an amazing conversation. It was.
All right. I'm jumping back really.
I just saw you just now. It went back again.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Excellent.
I can
I
see
will
you now.
jump off because I think my video is going. I don't know if it's my webcam or my computer, but I don't want it to go again before I thank you and say goodbye.
Okay. All right, Kaylee. Thank you for your
Thank
time
you.
as well.
Thank you, very kind sir, for having this conversation with me. The conversation challenged so much about what I believed around my thoughts and around my feelings. And I think I'm going to completely shift my perspective and see what happens and go based on feelings, go based on my feelings and my reality, and do what I can with my feelings and dedicate more time to understanding more about my thoughts, to understanding more about the fact that my thoughts are not the reality. My thoughts are, my brain just goes off on a thought trip. I don't do that. My brain does that itself. There's no controlling that for me. So I want to be able to bring in that control. And I don't like using the word control, but that's kind of what it is. I've let my brain just go off on its own tangent and have its own life and have its own creation without any input from me. So I want to take more responsibility, is a far better word than control. I want to take more responsibility for my thoughts and more responsibility for what my brain is thinking, and therefore more responsibility also for my feelings, and see where that goes. How cool was that conversation? Definitely check out Asher. All his links will be in the description. Please do check it out. He challenged me in such amazing ways. Maybe he can challenge you as well. please make sure you like and subscribe to this channel, and also check out my description. I am just dipping my toe in helping people now, helping people through this journey, helping people become more aware and challenging people's beliefs and supporting people, especially going through trauma and parenting, because it's hard. It's hard not to dump your stuff onto your kids. And I want to be able to support parents who are feeling challenged, who are going through their trauma, and who are trying not to regurgitate it onto their children. And I am blessed in that I did a lot of the deep work before I had kids, and now I have the tools to not dump it onto my daughter. But I also have the tools in being able to help her go through this challenge, because she can't avoid trauma just based on the fact of my life and who I am and what I'm going through and what she's experienced in her very short years. So I am teaching her the tools of how to deal with that now. And she is an amazing gift. And there is one area where I feel I do really, really well, which is parenting. And I want to be able to, I'm just going to take this out. I want to be able to share that. I want to be able to help support parents who are going through the trauma and support them in how to give their kids the tools and also communicate in a way that kids can understand. And if you want to connect with me, please make sure you click on the description below and go to lovecreatesfreedom.com. You will find all of my information there. And yeah, I think that's it.